so you ended up investing in some stuff related to enterprise, but ultimately kind of made your way into crypto. What was the intrigue that that you had that sort of drew you in?
So I've been in crypto for a very long time, basically since the beginning, through many different paths. And crypto in the beginning was Bitcoin. The first is that I was doing my PhD when the Satoshi white paper came out. And, your job as a PhD student is just to read papers. Like that's what you do. And the Satoshi paper was one of the most interesting kind of math, computer science papers of that vintage. And so pretty much everyone around me, like we all kind of read the paper and talked about it and didn't know what to make of it, but just thought there was some interesting ideas in there. I didn't buy any Bitcoin at that point, but I got exposed to it and thought a lot about it. And then when I joined the DoD, it was a huge conversation topic. Like we would, at DARPA in 2010, I was in the Information Innovation Office, a very small thing. There may be 20 people on my floor, and it was some of the most brilliant people in the world, like Mudge, Peter Zacko, one of the most famous hackers of all time, started The Loft, and this guy Dan Roker, who, funny enough, is like the VP Eng at OpenSea now, but he was running software at SpaceX before, and the people I was working with directly on this program, he became my co-founders, Matt, Tim, Joe Meyerowitz, etc. And so we would talk about Bitcoin all the time. It was just a fascinating thing. We would talk about what you can do with it and what ramifications for war, for terrorist financing, things like that. And then with my company, we actually used Bitcoin all the way back in the very beginning, like in 2013. So the way we would figure out companies' networks is we would basically scan the entire internet. So we would send, we literally wanted to know, our first step was to know every single device on IPv4, every single device on the public internet. And the way we would do that is we basically had servers all over the world that would send crazy number of packets to every IP address. And you had to send, we'd send like thousands of packets to each IP address because some of them would get dropped. But most importantly, like every device, if you send the right message, like the right string, like who are you or what are you device, or are you a Cisco, whatever type of router, like there's always a diagnostic message you can send where it will then say, I am this. And so we wrote all these packets. And when you're sending that number of packets, people will blacklist you. Like a good sysadmin will realize like, oh, these are these freaking morons from, California that keep scanning us. Like we're going to blacklist all of their IPs. And there were there were a few like server farms in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia where you could pay them anonymously using Bitcoin, and they would run computation jobs for you and then send traffic. And so in 2013, we actually started to use Bitcoin for that purpose. And then maybe 2 years later, we deprecated that because we had enough, we like set up our own infrastructure all over the place. But this is very important because if people knew that it was us sending the traffic, we would get blacklisted. And so anyways, like for what it's worth, it's a kind of crazy story. I think it was like $15,000 worth of Bitcoin when we stopped that program that we had in a wallet and we forgot about it. And in December 2017, when the price ran up to, just under 20K, we had to have an emergency board meeting because like that Bitcoin was worth almost our revenue for the year. And so we had to figure out, what do we do with it? Do we distribute it? Do we sell it and keep it on the balance sheet? Like, what do we do with it?
I thought you had paid it out already. This is the Bitcoin you had left, or the Bitcoin you had paid out?
We had probably $15,000 worth of Bitcoin in 2015 dollars that became worth, roughly $5 million US.
When you were paying these other groups in Bitcoin, was it like individuals or were they companies, or who were the groups?
The groups were like kind of very janky data centers is the way I would describe it. And they'd have websites, like, I don't know the legal structure behind it. It was like, there's a website, you send Bitcoin to a wallet, and then they would send packets on your behalf.
Got it. Do you validate that like they're not on the terrorist watch list, or KYC stuff for the vendor, or you just kind of ignore the who are we paying question?
I mean, we were paying them order hundreds of dollars. And I mean, Zach, I know what you're trying to do. Like, you're trying to catch me, but I think that
I'm honestly not trying to catch you. I just, anytime I hear like I'm paying some third party in Bitcoin, my first question goes, do you know who they are? Are we like legally paying this group that we're,
I mean,
sending
for what it's worth, I had been working in terrorist financing for years before that. And I'm pretty sure we were not paying terrorists. I'm pretty sure we were paying like Ukrainians that were really smart and needed to make a living. And they'd found a niche business.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. That would make sense.
I can't trace all the way to the bottom, but the dollars we were paying was on the order of hundreds of dollars per month at the time. Literally just to send actions.
Yeah. It was like an irrelevant amount of money that didn't make, I totally get it.
Yeah. And we weren't paying them enough money to where they were going to go like use our $200 a month to go do something really.
Yeah. I get it.
But maybe they'd buy some McDonald's hamburgers when McDonald's was still in the area.
Yeah.
And Zach, I respect you a ton. So I have no idea. Like, I don't know your views on crypto. Like, maybe you absolutely hate all of crypto, or maybe like it's only Web3, or it's people shilling things that are clearly like get rich quick schemes. Like, I don't know where you are on the spectrum, but like for me, my wife's family from Iran, they're Persian Jews. In 1979, they tried to kill both of my wife's grandfathers, and they basically had to flee the country. One was luckily on vacation to Israel, but they lost all of their assets, all of their bank deposits, their real estate, etc. The other grandfather tried to stay the rest of the family left, but he stayed to try to get money out. He got thrown in prison. He was there for 9 months and then was able to escape, ride on horseback from Tehran to Istanbul. But they lost everything. Even today with Bitcoin, like if you have Bitcoin and you put it in a wallet and you own that wallet with remembering 24 words, you can go anywhere in the world. And as long as you have your mind and like, you've not been put in prison or whatever, you're mobile, like no one can steal that Bitcoin. And that alone, like even that to me was pretty revolutionary. And that's something I really believe in. And I'm happy to talk about like terrorist applications or all sorts of things that are major, or, North Korea trying to skirt, currency controls. And like, I'm happy to talk about all that, but just that core application is what motivated me the most. And it's something that with my family background and also my experience of backpacking in 95 countries and seeing the way a lot of people live. I just can't even begin to tell you how important that application is to me. And that's really the core thing I believe in.
Yeah, that one is always interesting to me because I feel like, obviously, I kind of in a way fundamentally agree. Like that's an important. I mean, being Jewish myself, right? Like, talk about persecuted pretty much everywhere you go in history.
I'm Jewish as well, for its worth. I'm just a stealth Jew.
Yeah, Shaun Maguire, you're hiding it well.
Yeah. I could the amount of hiding I could possibly do with the last name Weinberg. the face like this, and if I turn to the side, the nose like that, it's like not gonna work. I actually think that use case has always been interesting because people, I think, tend to take this idea of like, I can escape with my money, which I want to talk about like logistically how that works. And then conflate it with this like broader, almost idealistic state of I can use a non-local currency, like a digital version, let's call it Bitcoin for a second, but it could be anything on a day-to-day basis, which I think is very much not true. The first one I think is an interesting case of like, all right, there's this like 48-hour, 72-hour window where theoretically, like I want to escape, right? And step one is I have to get as many of my assets as possible into Bitcoin or some alternative, right? I have to get into Ethereum, which I guess my first question in all of this is always just like, how? How do you get your local? Yeah. You see where I'm going with this? Like, how do you get your money into Bitcoin? Assuming you haven't done it consistently up front. If you've done it consistently up front and you have savings and you've actually hadn't, you needed to, you had the Bitcoin already. I understand that you don't have to do anything. Where do you get the main set of dollars? Like, how do you get it in?
Yeah. So first of all, I would hope that some people have been getting it in consistently before, similar to how a lot of people store gold and other kind of precious metals and things for this downside case. Second of all, just as a personal anecdote, like this is exactly what happened to my wife's family. Like my wife's grandfather, the one that stayed, he actually loaded like all of their jewelry and valuables into 3 trunks. And he tried to smuggle all 3 trunks out of the country in different methods.
Yeah, like the classic escape mechanism is like you buy diamonds with local currency and you kind of like hide the diamonds, basically.
And obviously all 3 were intercepted. And so none of the 3 trunks made it out. But there was this 48-hour period of like trying to get selling all their assets, trying to, at 50 cents on the dollar, putting it in, trunks of valuables, sending it out, hoping they'd make it out, and they didn't make it. But that is actually, I think, exactly what would happen here. Like, let's say, hypothetically, you live in a country where, like, quite literally, let's say you're a Persian Jew, and there were 200,000 of them in Iran at the time, and in a population of, I don't know the population of Iran at the time, but call it 20 million, to call it 1%. Let's say that everyone in Iran, on average, had 1% of their net worth in Bitcoin. You're 1% of the population. That's a lot of Bitcoin that's laid in the country. If you go and just start peer-to-peer in 48 hours for 50 cents on the dollar, instead of exchanging for, your valuables for diamonds, like literally giving the title to your real estate or, giving a car or whatever, instead of exchanging that for gold or diamonds, if you're exchanging it for crypto keys where people are literally...
Like I go to you and I say, here's my car. Yeah. Hopefully you have some savings, which, as you know, most people don't in these countries as a function of the fact that it is like an autocratic asshole in the top of it, right?
That's not true though. People have savings, just not as much relative to other places. And Iran in 1979 was actually a very prosperous place.
Totally. No. I agree. That's like an interesting use case going back to Iran.
And I'm just saying, so would you rather, like, quite literally, if you're in that scenario today, would you rather try to convert your assets into, say, diamonds and gold and precious metals that you can try to, and maybe some dollars that you can try to smuggle out? We have to ship it in a trunk and people can intercept it at the border. Or would you rather get it all in a crypto wallet where all you have to do is remember a 24-word password?
I mean, my concern, if I were in this situation, and thank God I am not, is that at a certain point, owning crypto in many of these places, if people are consistently escaping, will be illegal by decree, right? And in many cases, it probably already is getting close to that. And then I've got to go and convert my physical assets, house, whatever, into crypto, which means I've got to go to other people, locals probably, that I know, or maybe kind of pseudo know, because no one individual has enough savings to like really match. So I've got to go to like a bunch of people to do this. And then each one of them...
Zach, isn't that exactly what was happening in this example? But instead of...
Yeah, totally. No. I agree.
And this is literally someone that was on the kill list that was going to their Muslim friends, but they're their friend. And so it's just...
I'm not suggesting either of these are good situations, to be very clear. But like each one of those is now a digital transaction that is recorded and monitored by the local government, because it is like definitionally recorded.
How is it record? Like it's recorded if you're using Coinbase or centralized exchange. It's not recorded if you have your crypto in a wallet that they don't know about.
But like, you think there's going to be hundreds or thousands of people in these countries where Bitcoin is illegal that have unknowable wallets that the government doesn't just like show up and check?
I'm not saying there'll be hundreds or thousands, but I'm saying Bitcoin is the first way to actually accomplish the goal I'm setting out.
No, I just think of it as like the risk I introduce by going to, let's just call it 100. It doesn't matter, but I have to go to like 100 unique individuals.
You don't have to go to 100 people. And just like, I mean, there's so many, like, if everyone on average has 1% of their net worth, if there's one person that's really wealthy, that like maybe you go to one person, like,
right. And then that person sends me
two people.
That person sends me Bitcoin, right? And then a bunch of other people do. And I have to hope. And again, this is unfortunate. I'm not suggesting. I have to hope. Hold on. I have to hope.
But also, we're getting in the weeds now because.
Well, but that's how this is actually how it happens for somebody, right? Because they have to get the Bitcoin to be able to escape.
But Zach, if you go all the way back to the beginning, you had made a premise that if you don't have Bitcoin to begin with. And
no, and I'm suggesting even if they do, let's say they do, I'm going to give you the assumption that some people could,
no. I'm saying, let's say you as the individual, let's say you as Zach, the Jew in
Iran
or wherever in the world, let's say that you're already holding 20% of your net worth in a Bitcoin wallet where you have the key to it. Then you can now leave the country.
By the way, illegal for me to do that, to be very clear, right? Like in these situations, that would probably be illegal for me to own.
I mean, it was illegal to be Jewish in a lot of places in the world. Like you can't help it. And it's like,
well, I mean, I definitely can't help being Jewish. I can't help holding Bitcoins. Those are not the same things. But like, my point is more and look, I'm not, this is a use case. This is a use case that can work. This is
Zach in Nazi Germany, it was illegal. So my family were German Jews. And they left in the 1800s. It was illegal to get married if you didn't get permission from the local council, only as a Jew. You had to pay a tax every time you crossed between.
No, look, I understand. Like you can't persecute. No, the laws are definitionally not fair. I think it's I really do. I really think it's a great thing for the very small subset of people during the window in time in which they are trying to escape. Because it's like a one-time thing, hopefully, per person that happens not on a consistent basis, happens infrequently, right? I believe it is a good thing that they have an alternative to trying to buy diamonds and smuggling them in their coat. I agree with that. I really hope it works. I worry about the government being able to monitor transactions because they control the internet and they see everything that goes on either through cell phones or through the actual physical wires because it's an autocratic nation that doesn't have any laws that can monitor you. Like, I just kind of worry about the logistics of this. Like, it's hard. And by the way, it's fine. I agree. Like, this is an interesting use case. It's kind of like almost the only one where I'm like, okay, that makes sense for this little window.
That was my goal. My goal was to get you to find at least one because it's a spectrum. And now we know that you're on the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely on the spectrum. No, I will fully readily say if somebody is trying to escape, and they have a better mechanism to do so, owning Bitcoin or Ethereum, or frankly, anything that has at least some semblance of stability out there. And I agree, there will always be some like blockchain that has some semblance of holding it. Not everything's going to zero, clearly. That this is like a nice alternative for them. My worry is like, okay, that makes sense. Where's the rest of the market that we're holding up in these use cases that are supposed to be more on a consistent basis? Because that's like the one-time use case, right? You hopefully only have to use that one time. And then eventually you want to get your Bitcoin back to fiat in the country that you escape to, right? Because you want to use it.
I mean, similar to how if you hold gold, you want to get it into some fungible thing that you can go use in that new place. Like if you make it to the promised land or America. Anyways, glad that we're in agreement on it.
We nailed it. Logan, podcast over. Zach admitted there's a use case in Bitcoin that makes sense. Okay, yeah, sounds good. That works for me.
I knew you were on board with the smuggling out of autocratic nations.
I'm on board.
The question is just how big is I mean, obviously there's been from a quality of human life standpoint, like it's amazing that this can exist, right?
I think we probably agree on like at least 90% of things, even in crypto, and probably even more than that outside of crypto.
Maybe the part that is frustrating about all of this is like, then people take these logical leaps to the next set of conclusions, which are just like generally not true or accurate. And then we have, what I think of as the hype cycle, because people take this idea, they're like, well, if one person could do it, imagine if it's just like, that's just not how this actually plays out in any way. So my issue with the whole thing is not the like alternative for an individual. I actually think that's fantastic. And I'm glad we have it. It's this idea that we've invested like, I don't know, $90 billion or something in an industry where that money could have been spent on more interesting, useful things in the long run.
Companies, could have gone to Europe.
Could have been in like, I don't know, a biotech accelerator started by like a former tech founder with some other folks like that. And maybe one of those or, anything else really, not just biotech. So, but yeah, look, having an alternative for an individual, like it's hard to argue that that's not a good thing.
Shaun, one of the things that in these use cases that we're talking about, like there's a lot of either technical acumen required by people to be able to do this, or a lot of middlemen and brokers to enable some of this stuff, right? And inevitably the on-ramp, as things get easier, you need companies behind them for the on-ramp to exist, right? To like lower the barrier so that it broadens out, which then leads to centralization inevitably, right? Because now those people control. You can see it with, OpenSea, right? When people are, claim that they've been hacked.
The Moxie post, the Jack Dorsey comments. Look, I agree with 90, and Moxie's friend of mine, I agree with 95% of all of that. I would just say, and we can table the Web3 conversation as I get, or crypto conversation, move on to something else. I would just say, I think you guys know now what motivated me into the space. And with everything else, at Sequoia, we haven't made nearly as many investments as other people. We try to be very principled. We've mainly invested in infrastructure, totally acknowledge the centralization and totally acknowledge the weird dichotomy of like, if you want to have mass onboarding of people, it's going to create a lot of centralization. And that is a weird kind of perverse thing.
Would you, because now I can move away from, I get your take on it. Like, would you invest your dollars as Shaun, not Sequoia partner Shaun, but just Shaun, or Joel, in
I was going to make
as an LP in like a crypto specific venture fund? Like, would you put your money into it?
Trading firm, probably. I was an algorithmic trader in the past, but that's a completely different beast.
Because you're not betting on the ultimate outcome. Yeah, you're betting on the volatility.
Making money on volatility.
Yeah.
And in terms of crypto funds, look, trading is in a different category, it is also a different category of utility. I would invest in Paradigm. I think they're really smart. And I would invest in Sequoia because I think we're patient and have a long-term view on all of this stuff. And one
of the benefits of investing in Sequoia is you get the rest of the portfolio. It's pretty damn good. I too would invest in Sequoia.
I was going to say, both of them come out in favor of investing in Sequoia, Shaun.
You're like, Shaun, would you invest in the best performing venture fund in the history of the world over and over? Like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
One really interesting thing you said, and it's funny because I do think this distinction is very unclear to a lot of people, is the difference between the like crypto trading and hedge fund types, where they take effectively no opinion on the final outcome. They just trade the volatility, and it's like a money making machine
on margin at times, and sometimes get out in front of their skis. But yeah,
well, some do, some don't. Some do.
People with zero risk management experience are.
But that's like, to me, it's so interesting because there's a lot of people making money in crypto as LPs in the trading firms that look a lot more like Citadel as a trading group.
I was an algorithmic trader at DRW in 2008. And
some of my smartest kind of math oriented friends, it's really funny. You talk to them and they're like, yeah, trading in crypto is amazing. And then you're like, cool, what use cases are you interested in? They're like, the retail idiots. That's the use case I'm interested in, because I can make a ton of money.
You don't know where the yield comes from. You are the yield.
Yeah.
But I do two more things to say that are short points. Are one, I do think that there is real innovation happening in the space, and all of those people are often not very quiet. Actually, it's the loud, get rich quick people that are you hear the most of. But there's real innovation. I think from a computer science perspective, it's pretty easy to argue that both Bitcoin and Ethereum have very interesting properties, from a computer science perspective. Ethereum is a shitty distributed computer. It's like
a horrible distributed computer, but it works. It works. Yeah.
It's 8 orders of magnitude worse than AWS. It's 8 orders of magnitude more inefficient.
I mean, I always hear, I hear the smart people are building cool stuff. There is cool stuff getting built. I consistently hear those words. And then I never hear any details that actually are interesting at any scale besides kind of like
some examples if you want.
Yeah, it'd be great.
I would say there's 3 things, like, and more, but like there's a few things on top of Ethereum that I've found really interesting. So one is a video game called Dark Forest, zk.game, created by an MIT dropout, brilliant math kid, Brian Gu. And it's, first of all, like, it's just really fun to play. If you're a hacker, if you're a weird hacker, like, it's playing it was the most fun I'd had playing a game since like since I first played Counter-Strike. And I didn't mention, but I was a professional Counter-Strike player as a kid. And the game is like, it literally fully runs on a blockchain. Like the whole thing, and it's not running on Ethereum. It'd be way too expensive. It's running on a side chain of DAI, a stablecoin, this thing called XDAI, but the whole game is running on a blockchain. So every action you want to take in the game, you have to pay a fee, like you're paying to operate the blockchain. Another one that I think you'll probably disagree with, but with UniSwap, like, I think just what it is absolutely fascinating. Like, this is in some sense, it's a company where, and I'm not saying UniSwap, the company, but UniSwap, the protocol that runs.
Yeah. We actually talked about it. We talked about it yesterday with a guy, John, who brought it up as like a cool use case. It's like the most, I hate to keep using libertarian, but it is the most libertarian trading system ever created, which is like
imagine you create a company where like you create a company and you launch into space, or like, like when we sent like Voyager space probe into the outer atmosphere, or sorry, into the like outer solar system, it's like you write the software on there and it's just going to go play.
Yeah. And just does its thing. Totally.
Forever. And Uniswap is that, like, when you ship the code, when you launch the smart contract, this is just a coin vending machine that's going to exist forever as long as Ethereum exists.
Logan, what did he call it? He was like, it's like the biggest gambling house ever created. He had some funny phrase for it.
It's a casino that you're launching into space. Like never, that just cannot, you cannot change the trajectory. You can launch Uniswap V3 or Uniswap V4, V5 and hope that people will start using that instead of the old ones. But like, this thing's just going to exist forever. And that idea that you can have a business that makes money and like does something, like, I just think that's an insane idea. And you can have the thing spit off cash into a wallet that you own where no one knows who you are into perpetuity. That's not what they did. But I'm just saying, intellectually, it's pretty, there's all sorts of problems with it. But intellectually, it's a pretty fascinating thing. And then the third one is, and like, so overhyped. I have so many issues with it, etc. But like with NFTs, I do think there's some really interesting properties. Like the idea that an artist, like you have some digital item and you can program in future revenue royalty streams forever. That like, anytime my Van Gogh painting sells, that's digital, only the digital copy or whatever, sells, like my estate is going to get 1% fee every time it sells forever. Like I just think that's a fascinating thing. And I'm not saying that's a big utility, but I'm saying these things really have captivated my imagination. And I just think we're so early into all of this. And I'm not going to come here and shill any one particular program, any one particular thing. I think most of it's going to go away. Most people are idiots, but like, I do think there's some really interesting innovation there.
I want to contrast that little piece with probably, I know you didn't do the fundraising, but like what the LP story was for all these crypto funds is like, we just described like, $100 million of market cap total. And we raised $20 million.
That's what I think is interesting in this is, and this is sort of where I struggle is I agree with certainly your example of, your wife's family having to deal with that, right? Like that's an amazing utility. And I don't know how big that is, but, it's kind of people that live within authoritarian regimes that have money that are able, whatever. And so we can debate how big that is. And then there's the wallet as a social identity thing, which I'm not totally sure how the incentive structure would play out to get to that state that like people would, but let's say we can get there. That's great. And then there's the three examples you just laid out, which I think are all super cool. And then there's the idealized state of like what this could all be way in the future. And like, I think that's awesome if there's more checks and balances on government or whatever it is. Like I can imagine all that. In between, I think this is where I struggle, is just like how much capital and hype has gone into the ecosystem. It's hard for me to foot that with, and it sounds like we're kind of saying similar things, that like, hey, this might not be the biggest market today, but there's some use cases that are either super addicting or super cool, like UniSwap or that game you've played. And then there's other use cases that are maybe small and niche, but super important, right? Which is your wife's family fleeing Iran. And then there's the stuff way in the future that could be, but it's hard to say how we get from here to there. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. And I would just say that, like, look, we raised a $500 million fund when, as Sequoia, we look at the size of funds of individuals. Like,
your Indonesia fund is bigger than that, right?
Like we did that intentionally. Obviously, we do everything intentionally. That's point one. Point two is like, we can trade in the fund. And so, like the market cap for trading is very, very large. And then three, I think what we're all saying, but I just want to emphasize is like, I think there's some really fascinating experiments being run and some really brilliant people going into the space. And like, as I mentioned early on, like I built my first computer when I was 7 in 1992. And I just feel the same feelings I had in the early days of computing and internet. And it's like, I don't know what that counts for, but on a 20-year time frame, I think following where really smart people go and where young energy, like, and enthusiasm goes is oftentimes a pretty good strategy.
I keep hearing that. I keep hearing them. Well, look at all the young people doing this thing. But like, a lot of young people make very dumb decisions at the end of a bull market.
Exactly.
Right? Like, okay, that one bothers me.
Let's narrow this to IMO gold medalists. Like, let's see where they're going. And IMO gold medalists, it's a very different metric than Harvard HBS grads, where, Harvard HBS grads have had a very different signal than IMO gold medalists. Like, I would say the number one gainer of everything of where IMO gold medalists is going, of every sector in the world over the last 5 years, has been crypto. And in particular,
and Ramp, by the way, Ramp has a few. So there's, it's Vitalik, and then it's the Wu brothers over
And then the subcategory within that is in zero knowledge proofs. And something that I like, having a PhD in math and physics, and I didn't say, but I have 3 master's degrees. Like, I started a PhD and I've done it in math department. It's like machine learning, statistics, like robotics. We would be talking about these computer science ideas 15 years ago of like zero knowledge proofs, all sorts of like homomorphic encryption, etc. And these are kind of been holy grail ideas in computer science. And not only are we now finding applications of these ideas, and I'm not saying they're like commercial applications today, but we're finding actual applications, and we're also putting them into production. And it's just incredibly intellectually interesting. And that's attracting literally some of the smartest people in the world from like a math genius perspective. And so let's, instead of saying follow the HBS grads, let's say follow the IMO gold medalists. And I think that's a decent strategy.
Well, I think we agree. Like, listen, there's cool tech here. I don't think anyone would say like, these are very cool. Like, UniSwap's amazing, right? And the computational problem. And so I would never push back. And Vitalik seems brilliant. I think the concern or the question in all of this is at what cost, both to the dollars that are going in, as well as the other problems that could be solved. And so it's one of those things. It's almost like, what if you're wrong? Like, why be a cynic here, right? It's one of these things that, hey, if it works out, it's great in the future. And that's...
So I actually, like, look, I think it's my job. It's my duty to call bullshit on things. And I have tried to, when I think that something is a scam, like, I try to call it out.
I mean, it's a shame, honestly. I was making jokes the entire time while the NFT run up and all that stuff. And people internally can tell you I was definitely a cynic on pushing back on some different things. It's a shame that like this kind of manifested itself at a point. I almost wish we were having this discussion 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It feels like we're punching down and dancing on the grave a little bit when the market is where it is, you know?
Well, we were told that we get to read, write, and own. And I was promised read, writing, and owning things for a very long time through a very big press machine that turned out to not know what it's talking about, as evidenced by some of the recent clips that show they literally don't know what they're talking about in this space. Shocking.
Well, newsflash. The hype machine, almost never knows what it's talking about.
Oh God.
I genuinely think the criticism has been good. Like Aaron Levy, Moxie, Jack Dorsey, you guys, like, I think the criticism, you're 99% right. But I think that there's a real chance that this is a very important trend, like new technology over the next 30 years. And so it's just, we got to balance.
By the way, that's what I respect the most about the people that are coming on and having this conversation, because it's tough to do this right now. Like it would have been when the market was up, it's really hard to do it. And so now I think is the best time to be doing this, because let's have a conversation when the bullshit's out and let's see who genuinely believes in this stuff. And so I guess I respect your willingness to come in and do this, because it's hard. One, it always sounds better to be a cynic than an optimist, right? Just because if there's a 20% chance this works out, then, there's 80% a chance.
Yeah, the probability is not in your favor.
The probability is not in your favor. And two, I think this is the right time to be defending this stuff, because I know there's a lot of people doubting everything that we're talking about, right? And so it feels like hopefully this is becoming an elevated platform for the people that really do believe it. Like, let's convince the, people that are a little at the margin, right? And, eventually we'll find out, right?
The market will tell us.
Logan was concerned that the kids that sold weed in high school were going to be richer than him. And that's really why I'm here, is to make sure for you, Logan, that does not happen. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, that's back to Shaun, your fraud versus smart people thing. That's the spectrum of stuff that I had. It's really the PhD students like yourself, and then the drug dealers are the two people that seem to be into it.
That's basically the two phenotypes in the space, but I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's kind of true.
Yeah, that's what led to the rhetoric being as negative as it has been. But
you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
I really appreciate you doing this.
Last thing we'll say, guys, thanks for having me on, and I hope we all become friends. We all have a lot in common, and I genuinely hope to see you guys in real life someday and do all that.
Totally. Let us know when through New York. Thanks for doing this, Shaun.
Peace.
See you, man.